Okay, welcome everyone. I'm going to share my presentation. Toggle screen sharing, Chrome tab. Look at this. So slick. Okay, here we go. Everyone can see that, hopefully. Welcome to Freelancing Safeguards. Today we're going to be talking about how to protect yourself as a freelancer, how to set yourself up in a way that's conducive to a long, sustainable career in a very professional manner, in a way that basically is going to help you progress. And I'm going to be orientating it around game audio stuff because that's what I am. However, it applies to pretty much any audio discipline out there. Indeed, any creative discipline out there. Anybody who's in a creative field and wanting to freelance, wanting to be self-employed. So let's get into it. So, like I said, I'm going to be using examples. I'm going to be saying a lot of mentioning sound designer, mentioning composer quite a lot. However, if you're a mix engineer, a live player, like it's all relevant in some way. So hopefully the information that I give you, you can tailor it to your position and your situation. Indeed, if any of you are working full-time at a studio or are going to end up working full-time, a lot of these things are also very useful anyway. So hoping that a lot of people will find this of use. As I said, I am a composer sound designer. I have my own outsourcing audio company now called Double Jump Audio. Not single jump, double jump, right? And I've been composing and doing sound design music for a number of years now. And yeah. Also, I've decided to be super flash and I've added QR codes to my presentation. So if feel free basically to save these on your phone, like on a tab, and have a look at them later, basically. I thought that might be easier. Right. Let's talk about what we're covering. The first thing we're going to be talking about is how to get started. I've seen already in the chat that there's quite a few beginners or people who are about to begin. So we're going to be talking about a few things that are important to consider at the very start of the career. And again, things to protect ourselves with and making sure that we are thinking about the important things. We're also going to talk about how to look after ourselves, right? Mentally, physically, because a lot of this is to do with self-motivation and self-management because we don't have a boss per se telling us what to do and telling us to take breaks. Even then, like I said, it's still going to apply to people who are working in a studio because it's good to look after yourself, basically. The other thing is talking about personal finances. I love this topic. I know it's super boring for most, but I'm going to teach you some really simple tactics and techniques that you can implement immediately and make your life like 10 times better. And important to how to avoid the bad opportunities and take advantage of the good ones instead. So part of that is how to protect yourself, how to notice toxic clients, and what you can do to avoid them. At the very end, I've called these advanced considerations, but really they're just kind of extras that I find interesting, I find useful, and perhaps if you've been doing it for a number of years and a lot of the previous things you're already implementing, then these might be some extras to consider. Cool. All right. Let's talk about getting started. First thing is, what is freelancing, right? If it wasn't already obvious. Basically, not working on a fixed contract, right? Not working full-time employed at a studio as a sound designer, for instance. We work on possibly several contracts, smaller jobs per year, as opposed to working on for one company or for one project. And who can freelance? That's also important because sound designers, you have a choice. You can go down the studio route. You can work for a AAA studio or all the studios in between. However, or you can be also indie. You can be freelance. However, if you're a composer, you don't really have a choice. You're most definitely going to be a freelancer. I think I've met one person who has an in-house composing job and maybe one other person who was a assistant to a big composer, AAA composer, which is really cool. However, the assistant stuff isn't sustainable and the in-house stuff is so rare, it's not even worth pursuing or considering. In my opinion, I think a lot of people would agree with that. So if you're a composer or if you're anything to do with music, you're probably going to be freelance. The first thing to do, the first thing that I think, which is a big piece of advice, is not to rely on your income from freelancing. Particularly at the start, you need to build a reputation, and that takes time to do. Enough of a reputation to have enough returning and new clients in order to live solely off of your income from freelancing, right? If we are relying on this income that's not really consistent yet, we end up becoming desperate. And by being desperate, we take on gigs and we take on projects that aren't good for us in terms of growth and career. Indeed, maybe they're just not good in general. We know they're bad, but we're taking them because I need the money and I have to say yes. So being desperate equals toxic clients and possibly toxic projects, which is a waste of our time. It means we slow our progress. And you might say, well, Sergio, I have no projects at the moment. I have no experience. Surely like even 2 or 3 small bad projects is better than nothing. No, I'll still tell you not to do that, because each one will take you a step back. And imagine the scenario, for instance, that you take on said bad project and then halfway through it, a really good project comes along. And now you're faced with the decision of, do I unprofessionally let go of the bad project, which isn't great for your reputation, or do I take on both of them? And then suddenly I have too much to do. So we're going to be talking a little bit more in depth about that sort of thing. But the answer basically to not rely on this income is to get a part-time job, right? A source of income which is completely different, completely separate to freelancing, to game audio or whatever audio you're pursuing. I myself, for instance, I still teach, and technically that is a part-time job. I enjoy it, so I still do it. Before that, I was working in an admin job at my old university, or private tuition, like music lessons on the side. Something that was totally unrelated, but it was a steady income that could basically take care of my living expenses, which meant that I was less pressured to find work based on solely on money, and I could hold out for the better opportunities. Okay. And there are plenty of composers, plenty of professionals out there who still have part-time jobs longer than I have, for instance, and they're totally happy doing that. There's no shame in doing so either. Okay. It's more about positioning yourself to take on the good projects. That should be the focus. If you don't look after yourself, no one else will, is the bottom line, right? It's the bottom line. So ensuring yourself is very important. This could come in the form of a couple different things. One of them is having a company in between you and the client, for instance. If you're in the UK, then setting up a limited company is fairly straightforward. I believe in America, it's an LLC. Depends which country you're in or what situation. If that fails, then there's also self-employment insurance that you can also get. Essentially, it's a small comment, but it's also important to make sure in the very, very unlikely event that a client sues you, right? Then you have some sort of protection. Again, very unlikely, because if you've chosen a good client, they're professional and you're both following the agreements that you set, it's very unlikely to happen. But again, if you don't consider these extreme scenarios, then nobody else will. This next one, I think, is probably the most important thing you can think about. Okay. I think at the start, it should be 50-50 split between learning how to do what you want to do and networking, right? Networking your ass off, because if you don't find clients, if you don't build or establish relationships at the start, you won't get opportunities later down the line. A really, really common thought process is students especially say, I want to finish my degree. I want to get really good marks, really good at what I'm doing, and then I'll start talking to people. Then I'll be ready. And I disagree with this. I think even if you're not important, even if you're not in a position to be hired, you don't have the skills yet, then at the very least, you can start building relationships with people, right? Letting them know, relationships like friendships, professional friendships, industry friendships, so that when you are in a position to be hired, for instance, when you finish your degree, they already know who you are, and they can learn to trust you, right? Also, networking is a skill. Anybody would tell you it's a skill. It takes time to practice and get good at talking to people. So start as soon as you can. Start as soon as you can. Winifred Phillips, wonderful Winifred Phillips, has several blog posts about this exact topic. This QR code is your first one. So here we go. Here goes the experiment. Scan this one. This is a link to an article on gamedeveloper.com. And she lists out a bunch of podcasts and other resources that talk about this exact subject, about how to break into the industry. She also has a really great book, composing game music, which is, again, highly recommendable. So there you go. I'm going to leave it up there for like 30 more seconds because I should have put it on sooner. In any case, Winifred Phillips, gamedeveloper.com as well. Really, really good resources. The final thing that I want to say, which is something that I'm trying to incorporate into my freelance business more and more actively, is this idea that when an opportunity presents itself, there should be two answers that you give, either a hell yes or a hell no, right? This, again, is a really good filter between projects that you think are going to help you and projects that you're just taking on because maybe you're desperate to get your foot in the door, which is a perfectly normal mentality to have, right? You want to get started, but maybe it's not something that you want to do. Maybe you're not going to enjoy it. Then just say no. Wait for the next one. Focus on your networking instead and your practice, right? So if the opportunity comes up, you're like, hell yes, this is perfect for me. This is exactly what I want to do. If not, if it's anything in between, then it's just a straight no. Sorry, not for me. Not easy to do. Something to consider. I want to introduce you to somebody who I think is going to help us explain in an anecdotally, why it's bad to say yes to every opportunity and to rush. If anybody knows me here, you'll know that I am mad about Formula One, right? I love Formula One. Motorsports in general, but Formula One is my jam. This person is Pierre Gasly. Now, Pierre Gasly races for Red Bull. Red Bull, the Red Bull, the drinks company, right? You're right in thinking, has two teams. Pierre Gasly has two teams, right? An A and a B team. The A team is capable of winning championships, capable of winning races. And the B team is a purposefully slower car so that they can train and get experience for their academy drivers to eventually promote them to the A team, right? And Gasly was one of those typical hotshot younger drivers. They rose through the ranks, entered Formula One very quickly, winning everything. And within a year or two of being in the B team, he was quickly promoted to the A team, which is a dream come true, right? However, he was paired that year with a much more experienced driver in a new team with a race-winning car and a race-winning history, meaning the expectations hanging over him were super high, to say the least. Needless to say, it was a ton of pressure and it didn't go to plan, right? It ended up being his worst year in Formula One. A ton of crashes, bad results, and ultimately just not performing where he was needed to. Was it necessarily his fault? I mean, everybody, including him, thought he was ready. But clearly the pressure created a stressful environment which just wasn't conducive to performing at his best. So very quickly, he was unfortunately demoted back to the B team, which in Formula One, especially in Red Bull, is pretty much the guillotine in that sport, right? So he went back to the B team, and then suddenly, of course, all the pressure of having to win vanished, right? Because he wasn't in a race-winning car. Needless to say, he suddenly flourished again. He even won a race, which, again, don't have to get into specifics, but for those of you who don't understand, is next to impossible in the car that he was in, a feat that only a handful of drivers have ever done in the history of sport, right? So the reason why I'm telling you about Pierre Gasly, why am I telling you about all of this? Sometimes the pressure of a job sets us back, right? And I want to remind everybody that I always reiterate this to students, that it's a slow and deliberate journey, right? It has to be slow. It has to be methodically deliberate and slow and one tiny step at a time, right? Because if we start rushing, if we start getting into opportunities that don't suit us or we're not ready for, it's going to send us back a step. It's very easy at the beginning to say yes and be a people pleaser, right? An opportunity might present itself that isn't right for us, and the client is asking us for stuff, saying, can you do this? Can you do that? And you're like, yeah, no problem. I can do this. Oh, you're using Unreal and Wise? No problem. Even though I've only ever studied Fmod and Unity, I'll figure it out, right? Maybe it's a really big project and they trust you. All of a sudden you are overwhelmed with pressure because you've said yes to too much or yes to things that you're not suited for. So it's just a reminder to take it slow and don't be too jumpy at the first opportunity that you get. There's always going to be another opportunity, and it's all about positioning yourself in a way to wait out for these good ones, the ones that suit you. Okay? Oh, I wish I had more Formula One stories. I should have put more in. Anyway, right. Mental and physical well-being. And with that, I'm taking a drink of water. This is going to be almost the most condescending slide that you've ever had in an online presentation, but I'm going to say all of these anyway because they're super important and we forget all of these. I guarantee it, okay? The first thing, take breaks. Once again, you are your own CEO, your own financial officer, your own HR, your own dietitian, fitness coach, whatever you name it. You have to remember to take breaks. Your eyesight and your ears literally depend on you taking breaks or they will stop working for you, okay? All of these, blocked ears, eye strain, even hearing damage, all so easily prevented if you take breaks, right? We're going to be talking about how you can take breaks as well and how you can remind yourself as well. The next one is drink water. I love watching, if anybody else has, Tom Salter, the composer for Deathloop, among other titles. I love watching him talk because he purposefully edits in taking a sip of water into his presentation because he's basically reminding us, look, I'm drinking water. It's important. I always have a bottle at my desk, one that is very tightly sealed, okay? Because there have been some scares where Joel knows, I've been talking to Joel the other week and I just dropped everything. So since then, I've been making sure my bottles are a little bit sturdier. Anyway, I always have a bottle of water at arm's reach because if everything else fails, if we are stuck on the desk and we forget to take breaks or we're just so enthralled in something that we're doing, at the very least, a drink of water is an arm's reach away. Okay? The bare minimum. We need water. Keep drinking. The next thing, making sure we get enough sleep. I'm going to reiterate this point many times in this presentation, but being a freelancer, the strength that we had, the main advantage is that we have our time flexible to us, right? So we need to use it. Taking a morning off to sleep in an extra hour is not going to change anything, right? The world is not going to collapse behind you because you miss one morning of your routine or whatever. If you need sleep, take it. Within that as well, if you need to go to bed earlier, or you need to go to bed later, or start the day earlier or later, then do it. It makes no sense for us as freelancers to work a 9-to-5 job like employed people do. It makes no sense. We might as well be an employed person, right? So find what suits you. The task for today, we'll talk about that in a little bit, is to download a rest timer app. This is specifically for Apple, but use it as a reference. Just a free app. Don't spend any money. A free app that basically pops up on your screen and says, take a break, take a break. I've got mine set to every half an hour to be every half an hour. The first 3 half an hours, I have to get up 60 seconds, walk around, stare at something else. And then after 3 rests, I have to take a 15-minute break. I usually take more than that, but at the bare minimum, again, if you forget because you're focused, you're reminded to do so. A physical sign. And the bottle of water. Very important. Such an easy thing to do, and your life will be better for it. Cool. Organizing your week. Another really good mental and physical well-being task is to make sure that we're as focused as possible. In this day and age, the distractions that we have from different social media notifications and tasks that we might have as a freelancer, jumping from one project to the next, that's the exhausting part. That's the most exhausting part, having to switch from one to the other mentally. So what I've tried to do recently is follow the advice of somebody called Rich Webster, who talks about productivity stuff on Instagram. He organizes his week by doing one thing each day. And I have to say, it's been a game changer for me. It's been really, really useful. As you can see, Mondays and Thursdays are my days of creativity. So I do client work on Mondays and Thursdays. I have subtasks on each day of what I have to accomplish. and that's when I do them. And I'm not in the back of my mind on these days thinking, oh, do I have a meeting coming up? Is there a call that I was meant to be on in like half an hour? And I'm not jumping to my calendar to check because I know that all my meetings are on a Tuesday, right? So if it's Tuesday, I'm not doing any work because I know I've organized all my calls, all the client chats on a Tuesday, right? Similarly, I do all of my teaching, or I try to do all my teaching on Wednesday. It's not a hard and fast rule, but it definitely does help. Focusing on one thing at a time, blocking out any other distractions. It also means that when I'm trying to fall asleep, I'm not thinking about the 5 things that I was doing today, right? So I can relax a lot quicker. Okay, something to think about. It might work for you. The other thing that has really helped me personally is figuring out how I work. So figuring out when I have the most motivation, when I have the most inspiration to do something, i.e., when are my moments of highest energy? It's very different to every person. But you have to find out what type of person you are. Are you most energized in the mornings, in the afternoon, or at the dead of night when everybody else is asleep? Again, naturally speaking, we don't all fit in the 9-to-5 work schedule. And if we don't have to work in the 9-to-5 schedule like employed people do, then we shouldn't. We should figure out a more efficient way, a more advantageous way, right? Again, our strength as a freelancer is the fact that we have our time flexible to us. So that being said, for me personally, I know that I have to get up at 8 a.m. 8 a.m. If I get up at 7, I'm going to be too tired. If I get up at 9, a similar thing happens. Strange. That's my natural sleep cycle after experimenting several times. I also know that in the mornings, I have the most motivation to do something. So all of my hardest creativity stuff, all of my source control pushes and pulls and get cracking problem solving is all in the mornings, right? Because that's when I have the most motivation to do it. In the afternoons, I know that I'm going to be less eager to do anything taxing. So especially now in the Spanish sun, and I have to have my siesta, of course, after lunch, I tend to do things like admin and emails in the afternoon and evening instead, things that are a little bit easier for me to think about. Okay. So again, super simple task for today and this week. I think you should keep a really simple diary of your sleep and energy cycles. It doesn't have to be on game audio stuff. It could be in whatever's in front of you at the moment. It could be your studies. It could be your part-time job. Just have a little note, have a think of like remembering when you felt the most motivated to do your job, when you felt the least motivated, and maybe experiment with sleeping an hour earlier or an hour later and seeing where that leads you. Cool. And a final point, distractions are exhausting. That red notification, I think, is now scientifically proven to drive us into this fight or flight mode, right? Right? So avoid all of them. Put your phone on mute. Put your phone on mute. Do not disturb, airplane mode. Send it to the other side of the room when you're working. Block the apps that are going to distract you. Again, remembering that jumping from one project to another is exhausting, as well as answering one message from a different social media and emails. Emails now, for instance, I try to answer twice a day. Once in the first part of the day and once in the second part. That's it. If it's something super urgent, then obviously you're talking to the client throughout the day on Slack or Discord or whatever kind of chat that they've set up for you. That's different. But emails, nobody's going to be mad at you for just answering twice a day. In fact, they'll just get used to it. Right? Cool. There's also some great website restricting apps. There's so many. I'm not even going to bother recommending. To just find one, see if it works for you. Freedom is one of them. But again, I would rather you didn't spend any money on these things. There are so many free alternatives. Cool. Ooh, okay. So we're going to be talking about this documentary. If anybody has seen this, I think it's on Netflix or Disney. Can't remember. It was a great documentary. Super thrilling, super intense. I'm not going to be talking about what happens in it. I'm basically going to be talking about what it's based on, which is a profession called saturation diving. Saturation divers are people who quite literally stay underwater and live there for a month at a time, which is insane. Insane. They have to do some diving work on an oil rig or a deep sea excavation, what have you. And in order to be down that deep, so often, they have to basically stay there, right? In order to stay there, they stay and live in these capsules, as you can see on the right, essentially like little space stations, but in the middle of the ocean instead, right? And they live, they swim out, do their work, and then they swim back in, and then they go to sleep, they eat, they exercise, everything in this little capsule. And of course, on top of them, they have to be fed oxygen, water, supplies, and that's where these massive ships on top of them come in. These massive ships in the middle of the ocean can't just drop an anchor because it won't reach the bottom, right? So instead, what do they use? They use a bunch of GPS-based computers to make tiny little corrections in the many, many thrusters and propellers that they have around the ship in order to stay positioned exactly in that global positioning to fight against the current, and any sort of adverse weather conditions above them. Because if they start moving, the capsule will be basically lost. And it made me think about goal setting. Again, we have to manage ourselves, I think, a lot more as a freelancer. And setting goals can sometimes can work against us if we don't do it the right way. So I actually don't think we should be setting any goals. I think we should instead be using computer coordinated thrusters to adjust our position every 5 seconds. I don't know about you, but that sounds more attractive. Basically, most of the time goals are fixed. And they're either too specific or not specific enough, or such a massive leap in the future that they're not really helping us figure out how to get there. I will give you an example. At the start of my career, I said, I want to be a Hollywood film composer, right? That quickly changed to I want to be a AAA game composer instead. Great, fantastic, aspiring ambitions. I love it. However, that didn't tell me how to get there. That was a massive jump from being a student or even a year into stuff to being like AAA all of a sudden. So all it did for me personally was, after a year or two of not making enough contacts and not feeling like I was getting closer to that, it kind of stressed me out, kind of made me feel a little bit like a failure. Like maybe I'm just kidding myself. Maybe I don't have the right to be a composer in this field of music, right? Instead, when we don't meet these goals and when we get disappointed, instead of doing this, if we set a direction or a course, it means we can adjust ourselves along the way, and we can consider the smaller steps in between. So instead of saying, for instance, I wanted to be a AAA composer, instead of saying that, I said, I want to be a composer. I want to be a composer for games. That's it. And then waiting for opportunities to present themselves in front of me and being like, oh, I've just worked as a composer on a non-violent Animal Crossing style game, right? Great. I think I like this. I want to be a composer in that style of game. And then maybe you do a couple more, and then that defines who you are, right? Setting a direction that you can correct. Or maybe you start composing music and you get a sound design opportunity and you're like, you know what? I like sound design. I'm going to try it. What the hell? And then you end up liking it more than you think. All of a sudden, you're a sound designer. So for me, it's this mental shift of being like, set a course to something that you enjoy. Don't be too specific yet, because you don't know what you're going to enjoy. You don't know what's going to be presented in front of you. We can't all be able to score a journey or a hyperlight drifter so early in our careers to set us up, right? And if they never come, if they never approach us, these opportunities, we don't have to feel guilty about it, because we're working on what's in front of us. We're focusing on what's in front of us, as opposed to what we really want or what we see other people doing and compare ourselves to. So lately, for instance, I've been talking a lot about where I want my life to go, right? So by focusing on what's in front of me, like this opportunity has come in front of me, I'm going to focus on this. I know it would be a dream to be a AAA composer. However, I'm not that person. I haven't had their life. I haven't had their opportunities, but I have this one. This opportunity in front of me, and I'm going to make the most out of this one and see where this leads me. And lately, for me personally, I've been like, I'm not setting any career goals anymore. I'm thinking about what I want to do in my life instead and how my career can revolve around that. Because very quickly I realized I didn't want to be a AAA composer. Not really. I didn't really care. I was actually, and still am, just happy to work in video games, just happy to be an audio person, an audio nerd, doing sound design, doing music, whatever, on whatever game that comes before me, really, not even that specific. And knowing that that pays enough for me to enjoy the things around my life. For instance, What do I want to do in life? Well, I want to go on X number of holidays every year with my wife. I want to spend time with my family and friends. I want to live in the city that I want to, right? All I'm making sure is that the audio, as much as I enjoy it, is feeding that lifestyle, those lifestyle decisions. Hope this is getting through in some sort of way. I think this is a healthier way to view your career and life balance. And know that trying and failing is part of the process. And by setting a course and a direction is more conducive to that. So we don't feel guilty when we have to make a course correction. For instance, again, the AAA composing idea, if that ends up not suiting me, I don't have to feel guilty about saying, do you know what? I'm going to shift direction, right? That's the most important part. Correcting yourself, not feeling guilty about it, because that's the only way forward. Making tiny little corrections with computer-based calculations. Whatever. Maybe it was a stupid analogy. Anyway, moving on. Right. Finances. I personally love personal finances. I don't know. I know it's a super boring subject. It's unfortunately very, very important because we live in this capitalist society, so we have no choice. The good news is that there are really, really simple things, really simple safeguards that you can implement immediately and make yourself way more confident in your position. And I'm going to show you the things that have helped me feel more confident in pursuing my career based on financial decisions that I've taken, right? This is why this is involved. This is included in the presentation. I'm going to start by saying the typical caveat of I am not a financial advisor. This is not financial advice. I'm going to tell you what I have done, very generally speaking, and I'm going to point you in the direction to figure out your own conclusions, which is very, very important. Okay. If you ask me any specifics, I will simply direct you to the half a dozen books that I have read that have led me to my own conclusion. Okay. That being said, first thing that we can all do is have 6 to 12 months of cash savings. Cash savings that cover living expenses. So rent, bills, food, literally the thing that we need to survive, right? This obviously takes time, which is another reason to have a part-time job, a separate income at the very start. Having this means that we can be almost deadly in a negotiating table, right? When talking to a client on a potential project, if they don't meet our needs or, our desires in terms of what we want to work on, we can just say no. We can say no because we are confident knowing that I have enough money to survive the next 6 to 12 months. If I really, really had to, it usually never comes to that. But if I had to, I have this buffer. And I can't tell you what having this amount of savings behind you, it does for your confidence. Easier said than done. I understand that. Part of this is making sure that you put yourself in a affordable living situation and you spend a couple years, 2 or 3 years, maybe saving money and being diligent about your savings. I understand that. Again, plenty of books to help you figure out how to start saving and break that kind of mental barrier of putting some money aside. But 6 to 12 months, so many freelancers, so many business experts will tell you the same thing. Okay. The next thing to consider is that you are a business, you are a CEO, but you don't have to do everything yourself, right? Especially not your taxes. Please, please, please don't do your own taxes. Okay. I know in America this might be slightly different, so please take this with a pinch of salt based on your situation. However, there's definitely areas, everybody has areas that they can avoid and hire somebody else or pay for a program or whatever to do it for them. It's just not worth the risk, first of all, of you getting something wrong, right? The other side of it is that it's time consuming, it's taxing, it's boring. You could be like, Sergio, look, I know how to do this. I'm sure I could figure it out. Like, I know how to use Wise and implement all these adaptive systems. I'm sure I can figure out how taxes work. Okay, fine. You could. I could as well. I'm sure I could. However, why? Why? Why do you want to? If you have to spend 2 hours a month, for instance, figuring this out and doing it properly, could those 2 hours be spent better somewhere else? For example, in networking, in finding the next opportunity, in growing your business. Of course it can. Of course it can. So as soon as you are earning enough to pay taxes, start talking to an accountant. You'll be surprised that even if you can't afford a typical accountant rate, they will advise you on the best approach. They might even tailor their services to your needs and to your current situation. So at the very least, have a conversation with an accountant when you think it's time. Okay? Cool. The next thing. Oh, so boring. I know. Anybody studying right now, I was like, I'm not thinking about my pension. That's something my parents think about, or in like your early 20s. I think it's really important. It's even more important to understand that if you are freelancing, no company is paying into your own pension. You don't have a company pension. Yeah, you'll have a state pension, but those often don't give you enough, right? So thinking about your pension yourself is very, very important. At least thinking about some form of retirement, right? So this is different from cash savings. This is like any pension, an investment for future selves, right? And again, I'm not going to go into specifics. I'm just telling you right now, think about your pension. And I want you to read Ramit Sethi's book. Ramit is one of my heroes, right? He's amazing, fantastic. And I feel like he really speaks to my generation as a millennial and to Gen Z and Alpha after me, and certainly to people above us, of course. Gen X, can't remember. His book is great. He outlines all of these really simple, really effective financial journeys and things that you can take in order to better position yourself. Again, knowing that I've taken care of my pension and that's being like automatically taken care of in the background fills me with confidence. The cash savings, the pension fills me with confidence as I move forwards on this journey. Okay, so scan that QR code. That goes directly to his website, but he's got a couple books. Pick up the I Will Teach You to Be Rich one. He's got a podcast. He's got a mailing list. Just get into it, okay? Really good. I've realized something. I don't need my headphones on because there's absolutely no audio and none of you are talking to me. So I'm going to take them off before I sweat through my headphone cushions. Oh, so much better. Right, okay. Right. So having said that, how to automate your money. And again, Ramit will talk about this sort of thing, right? How to make things happen without you having to think about it, actively think about it. Okay. And the only issue with freelancing is that our income can be very sporadic, right? It can be volatile. It can be very different from one month to the next. I remember near the start having months where I only earned like $500 worth of project money, and then the following month I made like 7,000, right? Just these massive leaps and bounds compared to somebody who works at a studio where their paycheck is steady, excuse me, and they can afford to set up an automatic transfer every month of X amount into like a savings pot. We can't do that because maybe one month we don't have that amount in there. Okay, so instead what I do is I use percentages. I basically filter the money that is coming into my account. Okay, this is what I use. I use an Excel spreadsheet to calculate this basically. So I don't have to think about what I have to put into every pot every time an invoice comes in. I put my invoice amount at the top. In this case, it's 3K. And immediately I take care of my taxes with 20% going into a tax pot and 10% going into an expense or tax buffer, right? Anything that I might need to spend later on like equipment, I have a little savings pot for that. If not, it covers the extra tax that I may have to pay, right? And from that, I know all the money that I can then break down into the other important things in my life. They are all important. Like I said, social stuff is just as important as work stuff. I think they both play a really key role in your mental health and state of well-being. Okay. So I have fixed expenses for things like rent, food, bills, pension. So I know that I'm taking care of the future. I have a mistakes pot because I know that every now and then a subscription catches me by surprise and I have to pay like $200-300. Like I'm using dollars. Hopefully that's clear to everybody. 200-300 euros now. And I have that available, so I don't have to think about it. Like gifts as well. I don't have to think about saving and having a birthday catch me by surprise. I have some cash ready that's not going to affect my guilt-free spending, which I spend on the things that I love to do every month, like going out for dinner at a new restaurant, buying a new video game, etc., right? And I am making this available to people. I've made a copy of this so that people can download it, copy it, and adjust it themselves, right? all you have to do is basically adjust the percentages, adjust what you're saving for. Some things should stay the same, like fixed expenses, pensions. Everything else is up to you, right? And you just have to sign up to my mailing list, and you get a link to that for nothing, basically. Really easy. Hopefully that is useful to some people, because I know it was difficult for me to understand what I had to put aside. You don't want to be caught out by your tax return at the end of the year and realize that you've overspent what you should have, right? So by putting even just this 20%, tax is usually, depending what bracket you're in, it's usually like 20 to 30% in most countries. So this 30% that I put away means that I'm not caught off guard when I have to pay thousands at the end of the year. I'm like, okay, I've got that. Yeah. Also, guilt-free spending, something that Ramit will also talk about in his stuff. Not feeling guilty about spending money, because you know that this money doesn't affect everything else that's important, right? So it's peace of mind. I know that I can spend this money, and I'm like, great, enjoy it. Cool. Okay, another really important topic. Water break. Teaching clients to work with you. Really important, because most clients don't know how to work with you. I think at the end of the day, freelancers end up having more experience on how to communicate and talk to people than indie developers do, because they might work with a handful of audio professionals in their career lifespan. However, we will end up with a lot more indie developers over our career lifespan, right? Because we're taking on several projects a year, whereas they take on one project every few years, right? Thereabouts. That's sort of the game development timeline, 1 to 3 years or whatever. So teaching them how to value you is very important, because if you don't start valuing yourself, no one else is going to, right? So there's a few, again, really simple things that you can implement like immediately that will automatically show them how to value you and how to treat you the right way. The first one is 50% upfront. Okay? 50% upfront. You are your own insurance. Remember, this is a form of insurance. If they ghost you, if the client stops talking to you after like 1 day of starting and you haven't received any money, you've just wasted your time. You've wasted your time looking for another project or saying no to other opportunities because you committed yourself to this, and you're left with no money, right? You are not an employee. You are a flexible freelancer, which is a massive advantage to the clients. You have to remind them of that. So the only explanation you need to give to this is that this is a professional courtesy, okay? And any serious client who is serious about working with you will not hesitate to give you the money for this. A small amendment, if you are working on a big project that's like several five figures, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know, 30K upwards, then you can possibly consider taking like 30% instead, right? That's fine. Thereabouts. I wouldn't take any less than that. It's just a show of professional trust, okay? The other thing that my Canadian friend Kevin Rigamy will will be the first person to emphasize, is set an end payment date. Without it, you run the risk of having several projects overlapping, right? Let's say a project without an end payment date, in the last 50% of production say, hey, listen, we have to postpone the development of this video game. What? A video game postponing development? Are you kidding me? That never happens. So knowing that this is a very common eventuality, setting an end payment date means that they have to understand that they need to be ready to work with an audio professional. If they can't give you an end payment date, even if they are considering postponing, like, considering the eventuality or the occasion, the eventuality that they might have to postpone, tell them to add that on. Tell them if they think they're going to finish in July and they're like, oh, but we might have to postpone 2 months. Okay, how many months? 2, 3, 4? Shall we put it for September or October? Agree on a date, no matter what it is, so that they understand that they take the responsibility, knowing that they are hiring you and they have to be ready to hire you, okay? And yeah, obviously it stops you having, again, several projects overlapping at the same time and you being overwhelmed with work, okay? Again, teaching them that it's a collaboration, that you're working together. It's not just you getting on with your stuff and not communicating. Communication is really, really key. If you don't ask for stuff, you won't get it. It's as simple as that. If you need a little time off, ask for it. If you need more feedback, ask. If you need more support for a certain area you're not comfortable with, or you don't understand, ask them. They'll be more flexible than you think, especially freelancing, considering that indie developers are in the same boat, the same position that you are in. They are also self-employed, so they understand that they need to take their own breaks and rests into consideration, okay? They'll be more flexible than you think, okay? Another one that's really helped me is taking notes for every one of your meetings, right? Because often we have video calls and it's not all written down, which means that we lose information. So I always take notes for every meeting. I'm just there typing away. Just tell them, look, I'm going to be taking notes. I'm not texting my friend or tweeting something. I'm taking notes of what we're talking about. So you have something to fall back on. And it's not just to it's not to catch them out saying, you didn't say that. It's also for both of you to have something to reference. Because if you're maybe getting off topic or the client starts asking for something that they didn't mention before, you can say, actually, we didn't talk about this. We spoke about this instead. Right? And they'll be like, great, thank you for reminding me. Let's do that. Okay. If it's as an addition to this, if it's anything super important, email them. Okay. Email them, because I don't know, something changes, a quick date change or whatever, email them as a record of notes. Okay. Emails are permanent. They can't be deleted like Slack or Discord messages or be lost. Okay. Just as a small thing, but basically just take as many notes as you can. Cool. Also, I know everyone's asking me questions. If you have more, please put them in the chat. As with any of these aircon things, I'm going to be answering them at the end. Okay. Cool. All right. Almost done. So advanced considerations or other things to think about. Okay. If you don't know how to do something, ask somebody to help you. Right. I wish I did this sooner. I have like the end goal set up at the moment where I'm literally outsourcing stuff with colleagues and friends. So I work now with Joel, for instance, who handles all my mixing and production stuff to make my music sound good. And I work with Valentine on sound design so that we can split the workload and focus on the things that we're good at, right? But basically, outsource it. If you don't know how to do something, especially if you're a bit of a psycho like me and you're trying to be a composer and a sound designer at the same time, you have to be realistic in knowing that you won't have time to dedicate to both disciplines in their entirety. Right. So for instance, like the music mixing, it's not something that interests me, but I know that Joel is fantastic at it and it's something that interests him. So I can focus on writing the musical material and the adaptive systems, and he can take care of the production. Obviously, this requires more of a budget and bigger projects. However, I still think at the start, you can still talk to your friends and be like, listen, I need to do this tiny part of this project. I'm not great at it. Do you want to jump on and help me? And split whatever fee you have, right? Just be genuine. This is the only money I've got. Would you like to help me on it? You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised. And the best thing about it is that you're also delivering better quality work for your client, right? Because you're collaborating. I wish I collaborated sooner. Okay. I'm very excited about this new venture and stuff. So there you go. The other thing, like I've already stressed, is really put a focus on your social life above work. Make work for your social life, right? Always have your social life in mind. There's also an added thing that I want to include, which is kind of a morbid way of thinking about this thing, but it motivates me a hell of a lot. So maybe it'll motivate you as well. Is having the end in mind. The idea that nobody on their deathbed is thinking, do you know what? I wish I put more hours of work in. I wish I crunched more. Do you know what I mean? I wish I spent more time, working until 9 p.m. doing 12-hour days. Of course not. Their only regrets are ever, I wish I spent more time with family. I wish I went more on holiday. I wish I tried more things. Okay. So really have that in mind. Just whenever you feel yourself getting overwhelmed with work, start thinking, what am I doing this week for myself? What am I doing this week to spend time with family, with friends? Okay. As much as we love the work that we do, it's still work at the end of the day. It never, ever trumps sitting on the sofa playing video games, for instance, or going out and trying a new restaurant for me, or going and planning a new holiday, spending time with friends and family. I always have those memories in my head way more than work, right? I'm never like, oh, you remember that time where I was at my desk figuring out how to use magnet regions in Fmod? God, that was amazing. It might have been amazing, but it's never going to be as good as a holiday memory. Okay, there you go. Stupid example. The last thing I want to consider, I want people to consider is habits. Again, we are motivating ourselves more than anything as self-employed. So habits are a great way of tricking your brain. Yes, convincing your brain to do something that is important. And here again are two resources. Matt Diavella has a really cool YouTube channel. He is all about habit building and really simple tactics. And it's where I've taken ideas from to put in my free course. At the end of my free course, I have a few videos on the habits that have helped me. Again, super simple, easy habits that you can implement like today and get things going. Really important, really important. Okay, cool. Having said that, I'm going to conclude things and then we're going to go into some questions. Okay. The first thing I want to say is that I personally love being a freelancer. I love being involved in the studio in more ways than just somebody at a full-time employee might usually be. I feel like my voice is heard. I personally have many outlets that I need to satisfy, including music, sound design, being a director, being a producer, and I don't think I could find that in many full-time jobs, right? To me, there's no such thing as job security either. The main thing that people are scared of with freelancing is that it's risky, right? However, there's so many stories of studios going under or contracts terminating early or indeed just terminating at the end of the game cycle and they don't need the excess sound designers that they've hired, for instance. So in those positions, the stuff that I've talked about is just as applicable, just as relevant, okay? Making sure that you have enough of a network to find the next opportunity full-time or freelance. It does, however, take longer to establish yourself. There's no getting around this. I'm not saying that it's easy. There's definitely a lot more work to put in. So if you're realistic about the time that you're going to dedicate towards building this career, then you'll be fine. Then it's just a matter of time, right? But it is more work behind the scenes. And the final thing is that I'm not trying to, take a dump on full-time employees, so to speak, right? I think full-time work is great. I think studio work is great. If you want to be a AAA sound designer, etc., go for it. Fantastic. Each to their own, right? I still hope that these soft skills that I've outlined will be useful in some sort of way to solidify your position in that full-time role. Okay. Cool. All right. I'm going to open the floor to questions. I haven't looked at the schedule, Greg. I know you're after me, but I hope I'm not eating into anybody's time. 7:15. Ooh, okay. So we've got a little bit of time. Let's do like 10 minutes and then we'll switch. Yeah. Cool. Okay. So let's try and scroll up and check out some questions. Oh God, scrolling up is going to be difficult. All right, I'm going to start from the bottom. How do you calculate your rate for a specific job? I try to do an estimated day rate at those point for smaller jobs, but sometimes those estimates are all over the place. I try to ignore the suggestion of charging per asset, per hour, or per day. Again, teaching the client to work with you properly is all about having one conversation about money at the start, and that's it. Because any conversation in between is you wasting time trying to justify why this ambience has taken you 2 days to create, and the footsteps last week took you only 2 hours, right? They're not going to understand why. You understand why, okay? And you've taken that into consideration in your pricing. So I think a fixed fee or a fixed fee is the best way to go, especially at the start, right? There are so many nuances to finding your quote, which is not going to happen right now. Unfortunately, it's a whole other subject, but yeah, I'd start with that. Start looking at fixed fees. Look at Akash the Car's resources. He talks about pricing. He's my mentor as well. He's taught me everything that I know in terms of pricing and stuff like that. Okay, Akash the Car. Cool. Pierre Gasly quotes. I'm glad people know who Pierre Gasly was, right? Oh my God. The scrolling up, Greg. I don't know how we can get around this next year. Any tips on managing time and staying on track when yo-yoing between dry periods and times where everything seems to come at once? It feels like it rains, it pours, and it's hard to stay in good habits when work is consistently inconsistent. When you feel like you're in these dry periods, focus on your networking. Focus more on your networking. You'll feel better about it that you're actively looking for work, right? That's the first thing. Whenever I feel like this isn't like I'm not getting anywhere, I just double down on networking. I find more opportunities. I message people. I'm more aggressive with the idea of actively finding people to talk. Managing time, basically, when you don't have any projects, you focus on the networking and you focus on your skills practice. You focus on how those two can prepare you for another work, another project. And sharing those practices online is another way of promoting yourself. So it's just whenever, that's the best advice I can think of, is focusing again on what's in front of you. If you don't have a project in front of you, then it's networking like crazy. Again, Akash talks about this in a really great analogy. We go through seasons like spring, summer, autumn, winter. Sometimes we're in summer, we're full of work. We can't afford to network as much. Sometimes we're in winter where we need to network more than work because we have fewer opportunities. Hopefully that helps. Double down on networking when you feel like you're not finding anything. I found that it's hard to get work because they would rather go with a client they know they can trust because their previous recommendations. How to find work, getting your name out there at the beginning. Absolutely. But Sarah, remember that this works with us as well. I have more returning clients than you can imagine, right? Because as soon as they've worked with somebody, it's more about their trust. The important thing is that people don't get hired because they're the best ones out there, right? Clients do not have time to go and like compare search for sound designers and freelancers. It actually rarely happens. I've had a couple of clients who have never even clicked on my website and they've paid me like 5 figures. Isn't that mad? Maybe they weren't the best clients at the end of it, but right? It's so that works with us as well. It's more about, it's networking, putting yourself in as many positions as you can to meet people so that you are their audio authority. Okay? Game developers aren't going out there to meet audio people. So the few that they know are the ones that they consider. So bear that in mind. That is also your advantage. As soon as you find somebody, that's your returning client, as long as you deliver, right? Which is the best way to network on social media? I know it's harder to build trust when you're talking online. The same way that you do in person, showing up to places consistently. If Twitter is a consistent place for you, keep showing up every week, keep messaging on people, following new people, finding them, commenting on their stuff. There's some Discord groups that you can look into. Type in Game Audio Discord, type in Game Audio Slack, network in there. Type in Game Dev Slack, Game Dev Discord, right? Find places where game developers are in and just be consistent. Reply to people, show value, compliment on what they're doing. Say, this is great. Thank you for sharing, etc., etc. Again, there are more ways. This is another talk entirely, so I'm not going to go into this too much. In fact, you also have a freelancing talk, I think, coming up later this week, if I'm not mistaken. Introduction to Freelancing with Lewis Ball. Lewis, I'm sure, is going to go into this as well, okay? We're just talking about how to protect yourself as a freelancer. Really quick, is it true that a game dev team should allocate 20% of its budget to audio? It really depends. It depends. If you're working on a game like Bastion, for instance, you're going to have to dedicate more money than usual. If you're working on a mobile game or something that just needs an asset pack, then you probably need no budget at all, right? It really, really depends. Again, it's not about tricking the client into thinking you need to spend this much on this project. If a project doesn't need that much audio, doesn't need that much specialty, you're also allowed to tell them. You don't have to trick people out of money. It's not about that. It's about advising a client on what they need. And they will trust you more if you tell them, look, this actually doesn't need what you're asking for. Actually, I don't need to work on this. You can just afford to get this for free or whatever, if it really is that sort of scenario, and they'll remember you for it, right? So yeah, that's difficult to answer, I'm afraid. Also, would love to hear your thoughts on finding space in the freelance game audio world as a junior or newbie without releases under your belt, especially when competing with much more experienced designers. Something that might help to know is that I've got just as many opportunities from other sound designers and other composers as I have from meeting developers themselves, right? There's value in meeting lots of people, because sound designers who are further down the line don't sometimes find themselves in a position where they can't do the whole project. So they need to hand it off to somebody else or outsource it to somebody else. And you will be the first person they think of. So that's one way. The other, again, is just about finding the people who match your level. The first project that I ended up doing from start to finish was on Eldest Souls, and John and Francesco, the developers, were also studying at the time. They were also beginners. So our kind of levels matched perfectly. And then we both kind of rose together. So again, if you're not in a position for these advanced people to hire you, then you go for the people who are on your level and you come up together. But also, like I said, the best people aren't hired. The best people are rarely hired for the job, right? People don't have time to search around. Okay, I know this. I've confirmed this with big studios who have hired me, other sound designers. They don't look around. They look at maybe 2 or 3 options and then pick. So there's plenty of opportunity. It's just about finding these developers who haven't spoken to anybody yet in the audio and being on their radar for when the opportunity arises, right? Cool. I think I'm going to stop there and let Greg get on with his. But yeah, thanks very much for. If anybody has any follow-up questions, then I don't know where we can do this. If there's a chat box under the event itself, I'm happy to answer more questions, or send me an email or a tweet, and I'll try and get back to you. Yeah, let's do it underneath the event itself. So here, if anybody has any more questions that I didn't answer, please copy and paste them here, and I will. Right. Thank you so much for coming. I really hope this was helpful. I hope I convinced some people to be freelancing if they were on the fence, or at least protected. And yeah, don't forget the talk will be uploaded as well. So yeah, you can review everything that we've gone through. Cool. All right. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for coming. You're welcome. You're welcome. Bye-bye.